Now an investigation that is sure to send shockwaves around the world. This is a story of betrayal and abuse, of men working for the United Nations, preying on the very people they're supposed to be helping. Tonight, 2020 Chief Investigative Correspondent Brian Ross takes you into the African Congo and into the heart of darkness.
Every day, we work to save lives and alleviate suffering among some of the world's most vulnerable populations. We can do that job only if we have the full trust of the countries and peoples we serve. That trust must never be jeopardized by despicable acts like sexual exploitation and abuse. The United Nations has zero tolerance for such behavior. It is our collective responsibility to uphold the highest standards and protect all those we serve.
A UN mission in a country, whether it's a humanitarian, development, political, peacekeeping mission, is there usually because there are problems already on the ground. You are there to save the population, to support the population, and if by being there you create harm and you do harm to the population, then it negates the objective of everything you've set out to do.
The UN is the ray of hope. It is frequently what people are so looking forward to, is to have the blue helmets come in to save them.
We are given a special trust when we deploy to places that have been that are recovering from conflict or that are in deep humanitarian crisis. To violate that trust by exploiting the host population, it is a direct and abhorrent violation of that special trust that we've been given.
We have needs in the refugee center, and when we have insufficient relief supplies or other facilities to fulfill these needs, if someone tries to tempt us into exchanging something, then we have to agree.
The people we assist are in desperate needs for food, and sometimes they would be ready to do anything to get that food. But there are also some individuals that would be willing, and some of the food providers, to propose a deal. I mean, you get the food and you sleep with me. I mean, we'll put you on the beneficiary list and I can take your daughter.
Poverty exists almost everywhere the UN operates. Where there is desperation, buying sex is cheap and easy. Some UN personnel and aid workers have reportedly exchanged as little as a piece of fruit for a sexual favour. These girls had sex with UN workers who tempted them with cartons of milk.
We were walking home from school when a driver in a UN car pulled over. The driver told me he loved me. He had pints of milk in the back of his car, which he gave to my friend and me.
The girls had sex just a few times with these men, and both became pregnant. Since then, their families have cast them out of their homes, and the men have abandoned them. Soon they will have to drop out of school to care for their children, but with no qualifications or money, they don't know how they or their children will survive.
I can't imagine ever meeting with him again. I don't even remember what he looks like.
Survival sex is one in which women have no choice, where they believe that the only way that they're going to make any money, where they'll be able to keep their job or get a job, is through engaging in sex or in relationships with individuals. It is by no means a relationship of equals.
When acts of sexual exploitation and abuse are carried out by the UN, it is a double betrayal. Not only does it betray the trust of the individual, but it also betrays the trust of the world community. The consequences are enormous.
The UN come here to bring peace and security, to fight evil. But they leave behind white children in quarters and in the villages, abandoned without aid or support.
Mikael is 3 months old. His father is a UN worker who used to give his mother biscuits in exchange for sex. When she became pregnant, he left and has not been heard from since.
The father of Mikael used his financial power. He said, "You become my friend, you pay me a visit." Every time she came, he would give her a little something, some food, nothing significant, just enough to live on for one day.
Mikael's mother survives on less than $1 a day by selling bananas. Now this money must stretch to feed and clothe Mikael as well. But growing up in poverty will not be his only problem.
When Congolese children see that their skin color is different, they will call them names. They will say things like Muzungu Tali Tali, which means you are not white and you are not black either.
There are other consequences for victims, besides possible discrimination, including the very real threat of HIV/AIDS. But it is the robbing of a person's humanity that is perhaps the greatest harm of all.
I met this girl in northern Uganda. She was sexually abused. When I talked to her, she had no soul in her eyes, and she said that she had nightmares every day.
Violence against women is endemic in times of peace and in war. UNFPA estimates that 1 in every 3 women will be beaten, coerced into sex, or abused in her lifetime.
UN personnel are often deployed in countries where gender-based violence is endemic. Women, girls, but also men and boys, in situations of conflict or forced displacement, often rely on external actors to support them with protection and assistance.
But unfortunately, in many refugee camps where families have fled for safety, United Nations and humanitarian personnel have also sexually abused them.
Oftentimes you arrive in a country where the impunity for abuse is so raw, is so there, is so on the surface. And there are people on our side, you know, in our house, that take advantage of those situations.
In almost all situations where the UN operates, it is poverty that will drive people to sell sex. The majority of victims are women and girls.
Families are often so poor, the only way that they can make a living is by selling their daughter, or son in some cases, but primarily their daughters, to some middleman under some pretext, and then the girl or boy, you know, would end up in some kind of prostitution racket.
You give me $1, I'm going to give my children from me, my home.
Freddie is a teenager, and he is also a pimp. He makes his living by selling girls to UN workers. His customers normally ask for young girls, which he finds for them in bars and brothels around the city.
What age of women are they asking for?
They would point at the girls on the beach and say, I like that one, or the other one. They would point to a tall girl, but she wasn't very old. I'd look for girls who had young faces, not mothers. I'd then go and talk to these women, and if they knew they'd get money, they'd come to the camp, and then I'd get my money and leave them alone.
Have you ever had customers from the UN?
I have got many from there because I always come towards the center of town. And if I get one, I go with him. If he only ejaculates once, then he gives me $5 or $10 or even $20, and then I go back and look for others.
When UN personnel buy sex, it negatively impacts on victims as well as communities. It can also lead to sex trafficking.
When I arrived, I saw people on the street with guns, military people. I asked myself, where are we?
Amal was 16 when she boarded a plane from her home in Morocco. She thought she was heading to Europe to work as a waitress. Instead, she was trafficked to Liberia, where she was forced to work as a prostitute.
After 1 week at Sugar Club, I was no more a virgin. I have lost my virginity. My country is Arabic, Muslim. For me, this is a big problem.
At the time, Amal thought that the only people who could save her were the UN. She described her relief when she saw a UN car pull up outside the club. But the driver wasn't coming to save her. Instead, Amal told us that he raped her and then reported to the brothel owner that she was trying to escape.
It's vital that no one, United Nations personnel or other humanitarian workers, it's very important that they do not buy prostituted sex because it's dangerous. It's dangerous, first of all, because it attracts criminals. It attracts criminals because they see that this is an environment where they can make money. It attracts them because they see a market. This fuels the trade and trafficking of women and children, and we must not be a magnet.
Some people think they are helping when they buy sex. They're not. Buying sex harms individual women and children. It also encourages criminal activity. When children enter the sex industry, they become trapped in a dangerous world from which it is almost impossible to escape.
There has been a big increase in underage prostitution. We think that this is because children were separated from their parents during the war. They could not easily get food and were dependent on UN agents for food aid.
Unfortunately, there are individuals in the humanitarian profession who profit from their position of power to exploit children, and even cases of pedophiles who target humanitarian organizations for employment so they may have access to children.
This has represented a public disgrace of all that we have been trying to do in the UN system in bringing help and assistance to bear communities and societies that are emerging or still within the throes of ravaging conflict.
Managers have a particular duty to maintain a working environment that is free from sexual exploitation and abuse.
It's awkward, I mean, because in a home situation, working in your home country, a manager would never think they have responsibility to monitor the behavior of their staff after office hours. But as I said, there's no such thing as office hours here. You're on duty 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and your behavior is the responsibility of everybody, and everybody has the right to expect good behavior from you.
Perpetrators of sexual exploitation and abuse have been duly punished. UN personnel have been dismissed and sent home. Peacekeepers have been court-martialed by their governments, and contractors have been fired. There is zero tolerance for sexual exploitation and abuse by all UN personnel, and the same rules apply to everyone.
This applies definitely just as much to NGOs as to the United Nations, in large part because we're out there in the field conducting projects in refugee camps, in internally displaced camps, in communities that have been affected by conflict or are in need.
It's both an internal management responsibility vis-à-vis our own staff, but it's also a development partnership with all other development actors to try to do the best we can to prevent this.
Reporting acts of sexual exploitation and abuse is essential and can go a long way to restoring pride in the work and in the name of the United Nations.
As a woman, I feel proud because seeing the people that you're working with behave so well and having no problem with the UN, it makes you proud because, you know, at least even with yourself, you can depend on them as brothers, because if they can be able to respect the other women from the other societies, I'm so sure they can be able to respect you too.
But unfortunately, the majority of cases are likely to go unreported.
When people hear a rumor of abuse or see somebody behaving in a way that's inappropriate, they're often very hesitant to report that because they say to themselves, what if I'm wrong? So they tend to shut up about it. But you have to think, what if they're right? What if lifelong damage is being committed against this child and you've done nothing about it?
Enforcing discipline doesn't bring a bad name to a unit. So therefore this aspect of covering up is ridiculous. What gives a good name to the unit is the fact that you enforce discipline. So if someone commits something wrong, the unit's name in fact is enhanced if it is shown that you've taken action against the person who's committed the offense.
We want all of us in this area of work to be part of the solution and not part of the problem. And silence makes us part of the problem.
It's simply unacceptable from a moral standpoint and a political standpoint that we stand by and let it happen. And so it is the responsibility of each and every one of us to ensure that this phenomenon does not persist in UN peacekeeping or in any UN presence around the globe.
The standard that UN portrays or is seen by others should be very high, because this is the standard by which the world is measured. If the standard comes down, then it means the world is rotten.
The United Nations exists to end suffering and restore human dignity. Sexual exploitation and abuse by our own people harms those we are there to assist. It is unacceptable. Together, let us serve with pride. Let us live up to the trust and hope of those who depend on the United Nations and on us.